just figured that was his will. So I don't want anyone to think that I'm a brother that doesn't want to believe that he killed himself, because I fully believed it at first. And then the next day, they did the autopsy. And the autopsy was performed by the city pathologist. I had the right to have my own pathologist there, so we hired Dr. Michael Bodden, who's very well known in that
Same
world.
fellow that was on 60 Minutes.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
He's been around for... He was part of the team that did the autopsy on JFK. He's in his 90s. He's been very active all the time. So I hired him. I see you have a picture of him. And he was there to witness the autopsy on my behalf. And they came out of the autopsy room. I was there at the medical examiner's office. And the Dr. Roman and Dr. Bodden said they couldn't call it a suicide because it looked too much like a homicide. So that started raising questions, because if it was a suicide, it's usually pretty clear. Okay. And then on the initial death certificate, which we had to get in order to claim the body, it said cause of death said pending further investigation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in speaking with many pathologists, or a few pathologists since, usually when it says pending further investigation, you don't get an answer for many weeks. You have to get an initial death certificate to get the body. So they put pending further investigation. You know, if it was clearly a suicide, it would say suicide. So then a few days later, the chief medical examiner, Barbara Sampson, who did not see the body, she claims it was a suicide. Based on what? What investigating was done in those few short days? No one's been able to come up with an answer. When I met with the Justice Department people months later, and every question I asked them, all they said was, after a thorough investigation, we determined it was a suicide. You know, I said, but what about this? After a thorough investigation, we determined it was a suicide. It was like when somebody pleads the fifth. You know, you have to question after question. That's what I was getting. And Barbara Sampson has not given anybody an answer of how she made that determination. Someone said she was basing it on the fact that she thought that there was a prior suicide attempt, but that's been debunked. We know that Jeffrey's cellmate at the time attacked him.
The cop that was facing four murders or whatever he had going on. Yeah.
And he's just been convicted more recently of the 4 murders he was charged with. Right. So he didn't try to commit suicide. Also, like the day later, you know, he was put on suicide watch, then pretty quickly taken off a suicide watch because they realized it wasn't a suicide attempt. So what was the determination by Barbara Sampson that it was a suicide? What was that based on? Suicide, what was that based on? You know, and then Bill Barr, the Attorney General, came out publicly, I saw it on television, saying that he personally saw the videotape that showed like the door to the tier where Jeff's cell was, because the camera in that tier was not working for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
He saw the videotape and he said nobody went in or out of the tier, and that convinced him it was a suicide. And I heard that and red flags went up. Number one, I thought, this is the Attorney General of the United States. He's probably a pretty busy guy. Why is he personally watching this videotape? Couldn't he have a couple of people in his office watch the videotape and say, nobody went in or out? Wouldn't that suffice? So the fact that he said he personally watched it, I thought that was bullshit. And then he said nobody went in or out, and that convinced him it was a suicide. Well, here's the chief law enforcement officer in the United States, who should have some criminal investigative experience. And any third-rate investigator you talk to will tell you that if nobody went in or out, all that means is that if Jeff was killed, the killer was already on the tier. There were 11 or 12 other prisoners on the tier that night who could have technically, theoretically, killed them. They wouldn't have to come in and out. And to think that somebody could get to that door, go into the tier, kill somebody, and leave completely undetected is asinine. When I heard him say that, I thought the thought that came in my mind was that he's the dumbest fuck on the planet.
Bill.
Bill Barr. Because how could you say something like that? Because to get to that door, you have to go through 6 levels of security.
Yeah, but it's either he's the dumbest person on planet, which we know he's not, or he thinks the people are the dumbest people on the planet who will fall for it.
Right. So I'm thinking that he's covering this up. This
right.
is obviously a cover-up. So then the question becomes, who is he covering up for?
Right.
Okay. And you say, what was his job? Who did he work for?
Mm-hmm.
Who's he covering up for? And he can't be reached. He won't respond to anything.
And who do you think it is? I've heard you say this, and the way you do it, it gives me the impression that you're trying to say he's covering up for Trump, is what you're saying.
Well, a lot of people have suggested that that's who ordered the hit.
But they're not on good terms. They don't even like each other.
Well, but if Trump did this, there would be if that was the case, this was protected under all kinds of national security laws, and Bill Barr would be restricted from speaking about it.
Oh, if Bill Barr, from especially what happened 2 nights ago on the debate, I'm sure you watched the debate, mm-hmm. Anybody who has any intel, bad intel on Trump would be a hero today. Anybody. They would make him the man of the year. They would make him the person of the year, to be correct, because I know Time Magazine wouldn't like that. We don't want him to be upset about us saying man of the year. But there's no way in the world. The price of getting any dirt on Trump today is got to be the highest price that people are willing to pay today. So for me, when I think about, is Bill hiding that from him? I don't know. By the way, let's continue. A lot of information on people.
Yeah.
Okay, such as?
Well, I don't know. Jeff and I were not that close. He didn't tell me. He would tell me funny stories, things that we did, and I would keep him abreast with family news. I hadn't seen him for a number of years before he died, but we were always in touch via email or phone calls. So he would tell me funny stories. But I said publicly before, in 2016, we were talking about the election. Just, I asked him what he thought was going to take place between, Hillary and Trump. And he didn't tell me what he knew, but he said that if he said what he knew about both candidates, they'd have to cancel the election. That was a quote. Like I said, I don't know what he knew. And he wouldn't just say that to me to impress me in any way, shape, or form. Obviously he knew something, and he made that comment. Well, most of the people he dealt with had no idea he had a brother. I've met people who were surprised when I said that Jeffrey was my brother, including Bill Clinton. I met Bill Clinton, and I told him Jeffrey was my brother. He was kind of shocked.
He didn't know?
No. Yeah.
Got it. So,
and the meeting had nothing to do with Jeffrey. Yeah.
The meeting had nothing to do.
Yeah, when I met Bill Clinton, it had nothing to do with Jeffrey.
Got it. Yeah. Got it.